Charlie Watts Riots, everybody. Give it up. And Kevin Allison. So I have to apologize. That was a much jauntier run up to the mic than this story deserves. How many people remember meeting the person who would become their very best friend? Right? Okay, about half the people. And how many of you remember meeting the person who would become the darkest influence in your life? Actually, more people. Okay, then you'll like this. This is a story about friendship and betrayal. It's a story also about trust and my dangerously high levels of optimism that course through my bloodstream. So it's 1986, and I'm just about to graduate from the Rhode Island School of Design. Thank you. Rhode Island, or maybe school, somebody whooped for. But I'm graduating with a nearly worthless degree in painting. And my parents are very proud. And I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. And it seems to come down to two options. I'm either going to move in with my parents or try to get a job that I hate. And I hadn't thought much more beyond that. But somehow over the summer, I managed to get a position as the teaching fellow, the art teaching fellow at a place called Phillips Academy, which is one of the most, I guess, prestigious prep schools in the country. So in late summer of '86, I borrow a truck and I load all of my stuff up into this truck and I drive to Andover, Massachusetts to start this new job where my duties are teaching 5 art classes a day, coaching JV baseball, and running a dormitory of 24 kids, along with a longtime Phillips employee who's been there for 10 years in the dorm, and then a guy who's come up that year with me, who's the football coach, a guy named Leon. So Chris and Leon and me are running the Bartlett dormitory. And my apartment stretches the length of this very long dorm. So when you come up to the North Landing, the only place you can go is into my room. And if you come up the South Landing, the only place you can go is into my kitchen. So I decide, in what now seems a monumental miscalculation of trust, to have an open door policy. And I'm going to leave my doors open 24 hours a day for these 24 kids that I don't know to come in and speak with me about their problems. And it turns out they have a lot of problems. They had questions about drinking and about drugs, not like how to get them, but how, like, what to do in these situations. They had questions about sex, why doesn't this girl like me? Or they would come in and say, Oatman, I think I might be straight. Or, wait for it. And, but mostly, and this is the sad part, they had a lot of questions about why don't my parents like me? They ship me off for 10 months of the year to a school, and this has been happening for 14 or 15 years. And there was a lot of insecurity about who they were and why they were at this place. And as one teacher explained to me, these were the kids who would graduate and eventually go on to run the country, right? Powerful people. In fact, there was a book written in 1987 called Prepping for Power, which is about the prep school experience. So I don't have a lot in common with these kids. I mean, one of the kids in my dorm is the son of the Aga Khan, who's the spiritual leader of 6 million people. And another kid is a guy named Sajay Adu, who's Sade's nephew, right? The singer Sade. And then a lot of the rest of the kids are just kind of normal kids who come from extremely wealthy backgrounds, except for one kid in the dorm named John Williams. And it turns out John and I have a lot in common. John's from Vermont, I'm from Vermont. We're both from squarely middle-class kind of backgrounds. We felt out of place there. And also because he was a 5th-year student, what they called a postgrad, he was doing a 5th year of high school to get his SAT scores up, to study Russian as a language so he could get into a better school, and also because he was a gifted basketball player, maybe one of the greatest basketball players Vermont had ever produced, which maybe is like being the tallest midget in the room. I don't know. So to give you an example of the kind of kid that they had there, and this is zooming forward to almost late spring, one of the kids got a cut in his hand, and I had to drive him to the infirmary. And I said to him, so Sean, what are your plans? And he was a sophomore, and he said, well, I'm thinking, after Phillips, I'm going to go to Harvard for literature, and then maybe Yale for law, and then I'd like to work for a multinational corporation, maybe practicing in finance. And I said, actually, I was just thinking about the summer, if you were going to get a paper route or get laid, I don't know. But these were kids that thought way in advance. John and I began to spend a lot of time together. I took him and some other kids to my studio in nearby Lawrence, Massachusetts. They thought it was a neat space. Kids weren't allowed to have cars on campus, so I would occasionally take them to lunch. And more often than not, the person that I was having lunch with was John Williams. And after kind of feeling our way around each other, John began to tell me strange things about himself. I assumed they were lies. I'm the son of a very famous person, but I can't tell you who that is. That's a typical liar move, right? Or, I had an affair with my high school math teacher. We used to have anal sex on her desk. I'm like, okay, John, you don't have to impress me. I mean, we can just have normal conversations. And then he said one day, I've got this plan for stealing a sheriff's badge when I go home for Thanksgiving. I said, John, as your friend, I got to say this is a terrible idea. And as your teacher, you can't tell me stuff like this because I'm kind of duty-bound to tell somebody, more authoritative than me about this. So he's like, oh, I'm going to forget about it. I said, okay, let's just, I know you're all bullshit, so let's just forget about that. So a couple of weeks go by, and I'm playing in a pickup baseball game behind my dormitory, Bartlett. It's not a baseball field, it's just a big lawn. And I hit a fly ball into deep right field, the infielder been playing kind of close. And this legitimate single I tried to turn into a double. So I'm rounding first, and I'm gunning for second base, and I dive Pete Rose style. And the next thing I know, I wake up in my bed, and my pillow is covered with blood. And it turns out what happened is that there had been a sweeping tag. I was knocked out, and the kids didn't know what to do. There weren't any other adults around. They brought me up to my bed and just tucked me in. This is like first aid. And so I knew that a head injury was, not good. And the proof of that was the puddle of blood. And so I had another faculty member drive me to the hospital, and the doctor said, well, you've broken your eardrum, you've got a concussion, you've got a lot of bruising on your head and neck, you're probably going to have some hearing loss. But if we get on this quickly with this medication, I think we can minimize the damage. So, he gave me a month's worth of prescriptions, and I started taking this medicine. And about 2 weeks later, I go into my apartment through the north door, and I see that a table, my writing table, which is usually against the wall near my bed, has been moved into the center of the room. There's a chair in front of it, so, okay? And on it, there's a napkin and a little mound. Does this help these? There's a little mound of white powder, and I'm thinking, okay, the students know I don't drink, and they know I don't do drugs. Oh, okay, this is like, Mike Oatman, cocaine addict, this is what this is all about. So I clean it off, and I go about my business. A couple days later, I get a knock on the door, and it's John Williams. John says, hey, how's it going? I said, fine, John, what's going on? He said, you never said anything about my joke. I said, what are you talking about, John? He's like, the powder on the chair. And I was like, oh, right, the cocaine. Yeah, it was funny, and he's like, did you put everything back together? I said, what are you talking about? He's like, your medicine, I emptied out your capsules and I put them in a pile, and I went into the bathroom, into the vanity, and I took out the little amber bottle, and got the lid off, and there were 3 capsules left, and I opened the first one, nothing. Second one, nothing. Third one, nothing. So I'm chilled, right? I said, John, this is a big problem. I'm taking this medication because of this head injury, and I've got to report this. And he said, no, don't do that. Listen, I'll pay for the medication. I was like, John, that's not the point. I've been taking for 3 weeks now placebos, empty medication. We got to go see the dean of students. He's like, no, let's not do that. And I said, John, either come with me right now and you can explain yourself, or you can just take whatever the fallout is from our conversation that we have separately. So he comes with me, and it turns out that John's punishment, and this is like mid-October, for the rest of the semester, he can only be in his dorm room, in the cafeteria, in the library, class, or at practice. He's banned from competing in some games, and he has to be in bed an hour and a half earlier than everybody else. And this is like, second only to being expelled in terms of the worst things that can happen. And then begins the silent treatment. So for the next month and a half, Whenever John sees me, he goes the other way. Or if we're passing on the stairs in the dorm, he kind of looks up. Or when I start talking to him, he ignores me. And this is a kid who's maybe 6'3", very handsome. Think of like an athletic Cary Grant. That's possible. Slightly curly black hair, big black eyebrows, black eyes. Is a handsome kid, and he can be very charming. But during the silent treatment, he can be chilling. And I began to get very afraid of John Williams. So it's a couple weeks before the Christmas break, and I finally go to him one day, just out of sheer exasperation. I say, John, I know you're disappointed with me, but I'm disappointed with you. The difference is that your actions have now compromised my health forever. And to this day, I have about 40% hearing in this ear. And I said, we can either keep doing this for the rest of the year, or we can start over and say that we both made a mistake and we both violated each other's trust. And weirdly, he said that was a good idea. So a couple of days later, he comes to my room and he gives me a box. And inside the box is a sheriff's badge. And I know what's happening because this is John saying, I told you I was going to do this earlier, now I'm trusting you with the story. But he's also saying, this is a test, right? Are you going to turn me in again? And we started having our conversations again at lunch, and one day he tells me two things. He's like, I want to figure out a way to cheat death. And then he says, as a follow-up, or maybe this is research, he says, I want to know what it would be like to kill another human being. And of course, now I'm like, I got to tell somebody about this. Or maybe it's still his bullshit, because he had said other things, like he had stolen the championship banner for his basketball team from his high school. There was the sex incident with his teacher, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm the son of a famous person. So I'm hoping that it's just all bullshit. The winter break happens, everybody goes home for Christmas, and in the spring, when spring sport competitions start occurring again, there's a rash of thefts in the high school gymnasium in the visiting team lockers. So visiting teams are coming and competing, and things are disappearing, like jerseys, hats, watches, wallets. And I think it's John, but I don't have any evidence. And there's a couple of kids that have been hanging around with him who seem really kind of cowed by his presence. And so I don't know what to do about it. I keep this information to myself. And then we get to April of 1987, almost 25 years ago to this week. And there's a story that hits the school newspaper, the Andover newspaper, the regional newspapers about a break-in at the gymnasium in the athletic director's office where two brand new computers still in the box have been stolen, where the person or persons who broke in urinated on the walls and on the keyboards, and somebody took a big dump on a keyboard and kind of wrote some words on the wall in feces and trashed the place. And I'm thinking, I'm a master detective because I know who this is. But I'm still a little bit scared about John Williams. So I go to my co-dorm directors and I say, I think it's John. I'm going to tell you everything I know about him. And I'm chastised a little bit because I've kept all this information back, but I thought it was mostly bullshit. And so Leon, the football coach, takes his key and goes into John's room, and we find a bunch of stolen material from visiting teams. So now we know it's John Williams. He's called in by the dean, the very same dean who earlier last semester had reprimanded him, at my reporting. And the local police are brought in, the state police, and when John sort of gleefully confesses that he's done all these things, yeah, he's responsible. He also reveals that the two computers that were stolen were taken into New Hampshire and sold. So it's crossed state lines, and now the FBI is involved. So during the interview with the local police and the state police, they finish up. I'm asked to be in the room for some reason. John's escorted out, and as he's leaving, the detective taps him on the shoulder and says, John, can I have it back? And John reaches into his jacket and pulls out this nice pen that he's taken from the interviewing police officer. And he turns to me and he smiles. And in a monumental miscalculation of judgment, I'm asked to drive him home to his mom in Vermont. I guess because we're both from Vermont and it'll be a nice trip. But he's got to know that I'm the guy that turned him in. Okay, Postscript 1. It's the summer. Haven't seen John, haven't heard from him. I'm asked to stay on to coach baseball and to teach a visual studies course for the summer. And one of the kids comes running into my apartment and says, "Oatman, you got to come see this." And he takes me out back behind the Bartlett dormitory to the very same fields where I was playing baseball and got injured. And there, in 15-foot-high letters, spelling out my last name, Oatman, on the grass, it's made from my own clothing. So I run back into the apartment, and I look in my closet, and sure enough, all my clothing's gone. A Hamilton watch from the 30s is missing, and an audio cassette, if you know what those are, right? That I listened to every night for 2 years, one side or the other. Brian Eno's Apollo or Roger Eno's The Pearl. This is what I listened to fall asleep. Is also missing. It's like John has taken the most personal things from my apartment, and it's his way of saying, "Oatman, I can get you anytime I want." Postscript number 2. It's 1999, and I'm coming back from a trip to Morocco. I'm at JFK waiting to pick up my luggage. I'm at luggage, conveyor belt A, and I can see across to B, and I can see across to C. And there's a guy standing there. And it seems like I recognize him somehow. But he's different, and it's taking me a minute to put it together. And then I realize, okay, he's a little older. His hair's less curly, and he's a little heavier, but it's John Williams. And as I'm standing there, look at him, eventually he's looking around, and he gets bored, and he looks across the way, and he sees me looking at him. We have one of those moments where we're both kind of caught in each other's gaze. But I can tell that he hasn't figured it out yet. About a minute later, my bags come around, and I grab them, and I put them down, and I stare right at him, and I mouth the words, "Hi, John." And I turn, and as I'm leaving, I can see that he finally gets who it is. But he's got to wait for his bag, so he can't run up to me to say, "Hey, how's it going?" Or "Wasn't that weird?" Or knife me. Okay. Postscript, and last postscript number 3. It's 2004, and friends start to call me, reporting on an obituary of John Henry Williams, son of legendary baseball player Ted Williams, who's just died of leukemia at age 35, I think. The splendid splinter, Ted Williams, was the only person to bat 400, in the history of professional baseball. And his son, his estranged son, made up with him in 1996 and kind of took the family sports memorabilia business away from his stepbrothers and stepsisters. And negotiated, after his dad died in 2002, a contract with the Alcor Life Extension Company in Arizona to preserve Ted Williams' head in cryonic suspension. And now John's own head is going to go to Alcor as well. So I can't prove that John Henry Williams is my John Williams. They look alike, they have the same birthdays, they have the same kind of legacy and similar ability. I mean, John spent the last years of his life playing in minor league baseball, I think batting about 149, not having a great career, but wanting to be close to his dad in some way. And even though I can't prove that it's him, I check my closet every night just to be sure. Thanks.